Hey, y'all, and welcome to the podcast for the world builders, where we dive into the spells and strategies for Black feminist world building and creative actualization. These weekly podcasts and newsletters are presented by Cedar School, where all of this theory meets practice. If you've had the recurring desire to generate recurring revenue that resources your practice, then I'm going to invite you, just like I've done in the past few episodes, I'm going to invite you to download Cedar School's Creative Offer Questionnaire to Oneself. This worksheet will help you get clarity on your creative offer, and it features Audre Lorde quotes that you can cut out and tape to your journal, mirror, studio wall, steering wheel, refrigerator, right? Wherever you need little reminders. So the link to download the questionnaire can be found in the show notes. Speaking of the show, I'm so honored to be learning and practicing alongside you today and always. If this is your first episode, thank you for tuning in. And if you are returning, as always, thank you for coming back. Podcasting is something that I'm like always, it's one of those things where it's like it is such a labor of love. And it's when there is things in my practice where I'm like, okay, this is a little bit of a busy season. What can I cut back on? Whenever I try to cut back on the podcast, it never works. I'm like, this is too much fun for me. So truly, thank you. Thank you for coming back, because I always come back, right? It's again a labor of love that I hope is bi-directional. I hope you're getting a lot from it as well. So if you are familiar with the podcast, then you know we start every episode with grounding ourselves in our sensorium and giving ourselves permission to breathe into the present moment. So let's take a quick beat to become aware of our surroundings, right? Let's get curious about what's happening in our sensorium. I'm going to take 3 deep, full belly breaths and invite you to do the same if that feels possible in this moment. All right, y'all. Let's begin. Oh my goodness. That felt good. It's always a good idea to take a beat and breathe, right? Let's note one thing in your sensorium from that maybe pocket of pause. Maybe it was silent. Maybe there was some background noise. But what's something that you can see, touch, smell, taste, hear, something that you can sense or feel, right? Beyond the senses that we even have language for. All right. So what can I sense in this present moment? I just took a sip of my green tea. I can feel my kind of like the furriness of my slippers right now. I have my hands on my like workout gear. I'm gonna go for a workout after this. And I can see myself recording this. And if you are watching via YouTube, you can also see me in my workout gear as well. So now let's check in on our mood and intention right now in this very moment. My mood, well, so I'm right outside DC, and yesterday we had gray skies and a ton of fog. It was giving cinematic, which I was very much so into. And today we have gray skies and some rain, and I'm still into it. Like I love the contrasting weather. And just give me a gray sky just so that like it just amplifies my gratitude for when it is sunny. So mood is contemplative and grateful. What's your mood? How are you arriving? Can we give ourselves 3 seconds to feel what we feel without judgment? Now, if we move and shift our attention to our intention, in this episode, my intention, well, I want to do a couple of things. I want to name who perfectionism is for. Hint, it ain't for me or you, right? But it's not for me, it's not for you, it's for maintaining white supremacy culture, right? Plain and simple. But I like, because I think most of us already knows like perfectionism doesn't serve us. Intellectually, we know that, right? What I'm going to do is actually spend most of the episode offering a strategy for channeling audacity into iterative action through chunking down large visions into 3 phases. Because I think we intellectually know that we want to disrupt perfectionism, that it's not serving us. But it's like, where do we start? All right. All right. I got this big old vision and I'm kind of having trouble reverse engineering it. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So I want to invite you to take this time to reflect on your intention behind listening to this episode before we begin. We check in on our intention before shifting tasks, before starting a task, because what I have found is it creates this container of focus, right? If we create an intention before meditation, if we create an intention before sitting down to write, if we create an intention before sitting down to knit or, engage with a family member or a loved one, it kind of focuses the present moment and clarifies it and crystallizes it in a way that allows us to kind of like drop into a depth of presence that can just feel better, right? And less scattered. So let's jump into this episode now that we've set our intentions for it, right? Let's jump into this episode 65. Who is perfectionism for? Channeling audacious visions into 3 phases of creative business development. As you know, we're going to always start this thing off with a story. So Cita School actually started as an artifact, right? A single page of printed matter. A framework for a collective study called the Cita Syllabus, which was, again, like this fill in the blank unlearning device. It was designed as a worksheet. And the syllabus was inspired by the instructional work of Audre Lorde. Everything I do is inspired by the instructional work of Audre Lorde. It was created in 2020 as a response to the pandemic and the lynching of George Floyd. The intention of the project was to help folks organize and share what they currently needed to ask, read, feel, right? With the intention of making unlearning and engaging our radical collective imagination, right? A public and social activity. The Cita syllabus was created during the E17 Transformer residency on zines, and it was generously risograph printed by Ipsy Bipsy Studio in Washington, D.C. And today, I want to talk about how Cita School came to be and where I imagine it can go through 3 common phases of creative business development. And hopefully, as I'm telling this story, maybe you can start to think and reflect on kind of your journey of creative practice. And creative practice can be expansive, right? We can think about it in terms of our career. We can think about it in terms of you maybe a creative practice that we had seeded, but maybe have gotten away from. We can think about our practice as like as far like school. Like there's a whole bunch of different ways we can come to like reflect on our story. But I'm going to reflect on my story, the story of Cita School in 3 phases: incubation, activation, and like systemization. So number 1, the first phase, incubation. Inside Cita School, we cover the 4 different types of creative offers, right? Number 1, artifacts, which can be digital or physical products like zines, ceramics, music albums, ebooks, etc. Number 2, the second offer type is done for you, a done for you service. This can be photography, DJing, hair braiding, right? Interior design, web design, et cetera, right? Third offer type, one-to-many, workshops, courses, memberships, retreats, guest lecture series, etc. I guess technically a guest lecture series, but could be considered a many-to-many. But then we also have one-on-one offers, right? Which many of us may be familiar with. It's coaching, it's tutoring, it's music lessons, it is creative advising, etc. Cita School started as an artifact offering, right? The zines, and then iterated towards Cita Press. So it first was Cita Syllabus, and then we iterated towards Cita Press, where I self-published like a collection of Black feminist zines, but it started with the syllabus. So we went from Cita Syllabus to Cita Press, and the press later turned into Cita School, the newsletter, when my printmaking residency was over, and publishing and mailing physical zines became both unsustainable and just flat out beyond my capacity. Anyone who publishes or who self-publishes zines or self-publishes at all knows that it is a labor of love. And let's be honest, right? It's a whole lot of work for not a whole lot of money. But we do it because we love it, and we do it because self-publishing zines and books, they can be like, they're these really accessible artifacts for building community and incubating our own ideas, right? So the Cita School newsletter came after the press as a more sustainable form of publishing in my practice. And from 2020 to 2022, I seeded the syllabus, the press, and the newsletter. And I would consider all of this my incubation phase, right? And notice the lack of preciousness in this phase, right? If I didn't give myself permission to take these broad strokes and loose gestures, right? Take a painterly studio art approach to experimentation and improvisation, I quite simply would not have generated nearly as much data that came to inform the activation phase of Cita School's evolution. So now we're moving to phase number two, the second phase, activation, right? If we move into the activation phase, this is where I started experimenting with income generating offers beyond the one-off zines and printed artifacts, right? So I went back. Y'all, I went back and checked the dates and data for you because numbers are important to this story. I'm trying to illustrate a point. All right. October 17th, 2022, in a newsletter titled Responsive Web Design Syllabus, is when I first see a link to one-on-one coaching, a one-on-one coaching offering. And you can notice a theme here. I like to launch offers with syllabus or syllabi. And the syllabus was informed by over 80 Black feminist citations that I gathered as seed data in the incubation phase. The first world builder inside of Cita School ever was Glosy, and I remember them calling the syllabus seasoned. And that is my favorite compliment to date, that I had, like, it was the syllabus was seasoned. Absolutely. So, yeah. So it was informed by over 80 Black feminist citations that I gathered as seed data in the incubation phase, like I said. And this research, no doubt, contributed to the richness of Cita School's first one-on-one offer of, which was software engineering coaching, helping folks build a portfolio of 5 coding projects. And just a quick note on research, I think this is an important point to make. Quick little tangent, little sidebar. Beware of the endless loops and rabbit holes of research in the incubation phase, right? Because we can get to kind of just stuck in that part of I need to read this one more book, do this one more thing, go to this one more class, whatever, get this one more training. Research has always been a core part of my practice, and the way I maintained momentum is by sharing my ongoing research and weekly dispatches inside of the Cita School newsletter. right? Instead of which can happen, and which I did for a while, which is why I'm able to speak to it, connecting these dots in solitude, right? And letting them pile up and overwhelm me, and not having the call and response kind of energy that can happen when you're sharing your ideas and reflections in real time. What happens is, folks start to inform your ideas, and you start to see the dots start to become less overwhelming, and they become like, it becomes this shared practice of collective study, which just feels better. All right, so back to the story of how research and the work in the incubation phase allowed me to activate an offer in my practice, right? Because I had already been consistently dispatching from inside my research practice. On October 17th, 2022, I was able to launch Cedar School's first one-on-one offer to, get this, my humongous list of 244 subscribers. So for some of us, this is a tiny list. For some of us, this is more than we currently have on our list, but I wanted to give you the actual fact and figure of that number. And I told folks I had the capacity to take on 10 clients a month, and my books filled up within 2 weeks. And to be clear, it probably also filled up because I was dramatically undercharging at $300 a month for weekly 1-hour sessions, helping folks building their coding projects, right? So this is like under $100 a session, but it was one of those things where, like, if you didn't need the session that week, you didn't have to come. So it was just kind of like a gym membership. The $300 a month was like a come if you want, the resources here kind of membership model. But at the time, right, my rent was $350 a month, and $3,000 a month from client work is exactly what I needed to supplement the income from grants inside of my studio practice at the time. So I tell this story to illustrate the value of disrupting perfectionism, practicing and building trust in public, even as you're like in the process, right, of incubating your ideas. This way, when you're ready to activate one of your ideas, you already have a list of folks ready to receive your offer. And notice, I had under 300 subscribers, y'all. Part two of the activation phase. Let's drop into part two. The inevitable happened right inside my one-on-one coaching offer. I maxed out at 10 monthly clients and started to have to turn folks away, right? Which is what happens when, right, we're trading time for money and we're doing like this one-on-one work, right? And instead of what usually has to happen is, like, instead of steadily raising my price every 3 months, I decided to launch the first one-to-many offer inside Cedar School on March 21st, 2023, to now 429 subscribers, where instead of working one-on-one, I created a course of coding demos and tutorials that will walk students through how to build a full stack coding portfolio through learning HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React. I was still enrolling students through free initial one-on-one consultation calls. And to my surprise, this program, this one-to-many program, filled up pretty quickly too. Now I wasn't charging as undercharging as much. That program was $1,100, but a trend started to emerge where folks started to seek support on their creative practice more broadly, instead of solely seeking support on their coding projects, right? So I took note of this trend that was emerging in my consultation calls and inside my practice. So more and more questions began to arise from folks around creative strategy, sustainability, and diversifying income streams as an artist. This is where we move to part 3 of the activation phase. We're still in the activation phase where I'm like activating my creative practice with offers, gently scaling from a worksheet syllabus to a series of zines, to a series of newsletters, to a one-on-one offer, to a one-to-many offer, right? And trial and error from almost 10 years of art practice actually gave me the confidence to launch the Cedar World Retreat in 2023. Y'all, we're concluding the 4th season of the Cedar World Retreat. The fall 2024 cohort wraps up their last week in the retreat next week, week 9. And Cedar School has, like, since the launch of the retreat, or since the launch of Cedar School, we've served almost 150 world builders, and it all started with a risograph printed worksheet. I tell you this story to illustrate this core point. The only way to disrupt perfectionism is through taking iterative action. You don't need thousands of subscribers. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to have a full view of the journey before you start walking. You just need to take one step after the next. Right? We don't need anything outside ourselves but the audacity to abolish the cop in our heads and hearts policing our every move. Okay. So I mentioned we can take iterative action through 3 phases of creative practice. We talked about the iteration phase. We broke down the activation phase. Now, what about the 3rd phase? All right, y'all, I am back. And if it looks like there is a different angle, a different time of day that I'm recording this, it is because it is. I was looking at the clock, and I was like, I am not going to get to this workout in time. So I am coming back. This is real life. Number 3, systemization, the 3rd phase. After the incubation phase, right, and the activation phases, which we just talked about, comes the systemization, quote unquote, or the operation phase. And this is actually the phase that I'm currently inside of. And y'all, this is where things actually get kind of boring, right? Because this is where you're stabilizing and engineering for continued sustainability. And the trickiest part about this phase is not launching a whole bunch of new offers or creating busy work to invent distracting deadlines and a constant sensation of newness and novelty, right? That often has us unnecessarily reinventing the wheel season after season, month after month, wondering if and when it'll ever get easier. Turns out that's up to us, right? My business has become easy. And the biggest learning curve I'm inside of right now personally is letting it be, right? Letting it be easy for once. And this is something I'm having to continually learn again and again is, if we're ever on like this feeling of being on a hamster wheel, kind of remembering and, barring, this is so nuanced. Capitalism is real, right? Some of us having to juggle multiple jobs is real, right? Some of us having multiple responsibilities, caretaking responsibilities, right? Different levels of abilities and disabilities, like all of that nuance. Hopefully, you know me by now and know that that is always present in whatever it is that I'm thinking alongside you, like about, but a lot of times, if we are, like in a season of tension, wondering when it'll get easier, or a season of exhaustion, oftentimes, like, it's up to us, right, to put boundaries in place, to say no, right, and to let things be easy and not invent projects just because we're in seasons that feel slow, right? Or seasons that feel simple, or seasons that feel easy, right? This is the time to maybe, return to that incubation phase, return to your curiosities, pick up new books, right? And drop into like a season of continued exploration, right? So now I get my neurodivergent Gemini craving for novelty and improvisation from my writing practice, right? From my research practice. And in my writing practice, I am swinging between the lines of sentences and poems I'll never publish, right? I'm painting on the pages of the book I'm writing and coming up with ideas and like sourcing citations for this here podcast. So what's my point? Why did I walk you through this story of Cita School's evolution? Let's go back to the title of this episode. Who is perfectionism for? Channeling audacious visions into 3 phases of creative business development. And I almost actually named this episode, Who is Perfectionism for? Channeling Audacity into Iterative Action. Perfectionism and the audacity to start a Black feminist world-building school with a physical campus on 40 acres nestled inside a forest garden. That vision could have easily stopped me from getting started with a single 11 by 17 piece of paper I folded into a zine and called the Cita Syllabus. But who would that have served? Certainly not me, and certainly not you, right? The vision was always large. I always knew I wanted Cita to be a school with a physical world-building campus, but a commitment to disrupting perfectionism through iterative action is what invited me to start with what I had, which was a piece of paper, right? And in the mutual aid of Erica at Ipsy Bipsy Studio, who printed on that piece of paper that I then turned into a syllabus. And that syllabus has turned into a school that has served over 150 students virtually, right? And there's no reason why we can't do the same on a physical world-building campus in the future. But I had to start. I had to begin somewhere. Perfectionism could have stopped me from hitting submit to 34 subscribers on April 19th, 2022, when I sent my first newsletter. 34 folks said yes to the newsletter, and I said yes to them. If I had let perfectionism stop me from hitting submit to 34 subscribers, it could have also stopped my literary agent from sliding into my email January 9th, 2024. Right? And that agent's a part of the same agency that represents Adrienne Marie Brown and Sonia Renee Taylor. And I don't bring this up to name drop. I only bring their names up because I certainly cited their work in the early syllabi of Cita School in my incubation phase. Right? When I first launched the retreat, I ended up working with people who I also cited in that incubation phase. And if you would have asked me, do you consider yourself to be a writer when I published that first newsletter April 2022, I would have told you no. I'm not a writer. I just followed my desire, a desire that could be traced all the way back to childhood. Looking back, right, could be traced all the way back to a child of incessantly writing in diaries, in those password journals, right, those voice protected password journals, and even children's books, where I collaborated with my dad to do the illustration and binding while I wrote the stories. Now, I say all this to say, in 2 years, I went from not considering myself to be a writer to drafting a book proposal. If you can't tell already, this is spell work. And the only person that has the power to cast these spells is you. The only power, like the only person that has the power to pull your desires into the present is you. We don't know them like you do. Your desires, your dreams, your dispatches, your projects, the people waiting on your offers. You don't like we don't need you to be perfect. We just need you again and again and again in different flavors and different seasons. We just need you trusting yourself to take imperfect action. We just need you trusting yourself to take responsibility for your longings. Trusting yourself to ignore the cop in your head long enough to let a path appear. Right before sitting down to record this podcast episode, Patricia, who calls themselves a radical somatic therapist, goes by pat.radical.therapist on Instagram, posted a divinely timed carousel titled, I always say the resources and the references and the citations always appear exactly when you need them. And she posted a divinely timed carousel titled The Myth of the Expert Therapist, Dismantling Colonial and Classist Lies of Mastery. I'm going to read the whole thing here because it's just that good and deeply relevant to today's episode. She says, expertise by definition means mastery of a subject. But how can anyone claim mastery over the art, the complexity, the vastness of humanity? The real experts are those forced to navigate the violence of colonialism, white supremacy, anti-Black racism, queerphobia, transphobia, ableism, and classism every single day. The ones surviving the streets, holding the margins, and enduring in bodies that are policed, erased, and exploited. They are the experts of nuance, resilience, and survival. Yet they will never be handed titles, degrees, or applause for their lived wisdom. The society we exist in upholds credentials as a form of violence. Degrees, certifications, and titles are privileges born of colonialism and classism, systems designed to exclude, oppress, and concentrate power in the hands of the few. Our licenses and accolades are not innocent. They are tools of oppression that maintain hierarchies and strip humanity from those deemed, quote unquote, unqualified by arbitrary standards. She continues, let us be clear. Expertise as we know it is a lie. It is a colonial, classist construct that upholds exploitation and erases the voices of those living the most profound truths. Titles and degrees cannot capture the fullness of humanity. They were never meant to. We must dismantle these oppressive hierarchies and center the real experts, those whose knowledge cannot be bought, only lived. I had to drink some tea after that. I mean, because that's good, right? So who is perfectionism for? What stops us from hitting publish or inviting folks into an offer? Or just, right, what stops us from dropping into some illegible creative expression, right? Are we waiting for the somatic safety, self-trust, or sense of belonging, validation will magically feel on the other side of a new title, degree, job, wave of applause? So often we stall, hesitate on pressing publish, resist releasing an offer. We've already thought about so much that we could design the whole thing in a weekend because we want to project the patriarchal premise of expertise or quote unquote thought leadership. But what if we centered our lived experience instead? Right? What if we abandoned the premise of thought leadership altogether and picked up what Cedar School retreater Fatima Jamal calls thought partnership, or what Cedar School retreater Meg O calls thought stewardship? Does the perfectionism soften when we release the colonial and classist premise of quote unquote expertise? Because let's remember, we aim to be engaged in a public practice of collective study, not an intellectual competition rooted in scarcity and the colonial imaginary, right? And colonial ways of organizing and putting certain knowledge systems into hierarchies. From this vantage point, we can acknowledge perfectionism for what it is: harmful and invalidating. This acknowledgement doesn't mean the learned impulse of perfectionism will go away, but releasing it when we can will make us more compassionate. Y'all, compassion is a huge part of disrupting perfectionism. If you don't take away anything from this podcast, the best way to disrupt perfectionism is through self-compassion. Okay. Right. So the learned impulse of perfectionism may not go away permanently, but releasing it when we can will make us more compassionate to ourselves, which will deepen. And this is the like the fractal beauty of this practice, right? Extending self-compassion deepens our skills and capacity to hold uncertainty as teachers, coaches, facilitators, storytellers, caretakers, and guides, right? For example, we love a tour guide, and it's completely reasonable to expect them to know the way because hopefully a decent tour guide is leading you on a journey they've taken themselves, aka a lived experience, right? We appreciate a tour guide who is familiar with the way. But we also don't want our tour guide to get flustered and rigid or shut down if we get lost or need to take a different path. The journey doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, it won't be ever. Allowing and dancing with the beginner's mind allows everyone involved to navigate uncertainty with more ease and less self-deprecating judgment. We don't need that. We can leave that at the door, right? And this is an essential world building skill, right, y'all? Because we're leaving colonialism at the door and we're journeying into the wild of our desire, of our ungovernability, of our longing. And inside of this walk, we give ourselves so much grief for not knowing how to do a thing we've never done before, for not knowing how to walk a path we've never walked before. But inside this practice of honoring the value of our lived experience and trusting our ability to navigate uncertainty, something really kinky happens, something really hot happens. We cultivate a deep trust for ourselves and each other that we can leverage at every stage of iterative action and creative business development. To recap, we can disrupt perfectionism in the following phases of creative practice. Number one, incubate. I like to do this through creative dispatches. You will hear me talk about them again and again and again. These weekly dispatches, bi-weekly dispatches, in the form of a newsletter, a podcast, a video series, whatever it is that feels like the most, pleasurable way of being in creative flow and process. This weekly or bi-weekly cadence helps build creative confidence in your incubation phase. It helps build self-trust and expands your window of tolerance around vulnerability, visibility, and the general accountability of public practice and collective study. And in this phase, I want to invite you to focus on quantity instead of quality at first. Right? To me, Toni Morrison is the greatest of all time. If I held myself to that standard when Press and Publish for the first time to 34 subscribers, I would have never pushed it. All right. So quantity over quality at first, which is to say, right, prioritize consistent practice and creative flow in the beginning. And again, y'all, I know there's so much nuance here around capacity, disability, our schedules and demands that capitalism puts on our bodies. But in this phase, I want to invite you to simply generate as much seed data as possible. A core theme, idea, project, or offer will emerge that you will then be able to activate in the next phase. But you gotta have some seed data to work with. You gotta have some information to work with. Now we're moving on to phase two, activate, right? Which I consider this your offer. You can activate your creative practice. You know, maybe your dispatch is you returning to your creative practice, getting back into that flow. But we can activate that creative practice, right, through releasing an offer that allows us to generate income, right? And now our practice starts to get on the path of becoming self-sustaining financially, right? So number two, we're the activate phase. Maybe we're releasing an offer in this phase. And you can activate the seed data generated in the incubation phase through 4 types of offers. You can just pick one: artifact, done for you service, one-on-one, one-to-many, right? Remembering that your one-to-many offer can start as a one-on-one offer as you're figuring out your flow, your facilitation style, your framework, and all of that good stuff. And just a quick tip, you can incubate and activate your offer while maintaining your current source of income. This is actually how I recommend we do it, right? For example, I'm incubating the World Builders Way book inside the Treehouse, and each monthly creative marketing / dispatch workshop is named after one of the 12 chapters in the book I'm reading. You can apply this strategy in your current income generating container as well, current income generating job as well, right? Whether you're freelance, a contractor, a salaried or part-time employee, or maybe you work at, maybe you work retail at a restaurant or a coffee shop, can you talk to your manager about hosting an informal event to beta test your offer vision, right? To soft launch it in exchange for bringing the shop or the bar or the restaurant or the store more customers during off-peak hours. Just think about all the seed data this iterative action would generate. This is the kind of creative practice and move that destabilizes perfectionism. Right now, we're just moving by energy of play and curiosity. And the third phase, systematize, right? At this stage, your offer has replaced your primary source of income because revenue has become systemized, recurring, and predictable, right? And this is kind of where it gets boring, right? And we may be able to start this loop all over again and go right back to the incubation phase, which is definitely where I'm at. I'm kind of incubating the book right now, and I'm imagining me offering it when it's published is going to be that activation phase, right? And me selling it is going to be I'm going to be building systems around selling and building publicity around it, right? So we can kind of run this loop again and again and again, but it helps to know what phase of practice you're in so we don't get stuck in loops of perfectionism and lose our momentum along the way. Inside Cedar School's Treehouse, an annual membership for Black feminist world building and creative actualization, we support you through all three phases of creative practice over the course of an entire year, providing guidance, encouragement, and feedback every step of the way. Y'all, too many ideas is not the problem. I promise you it's not. If you have any self-sabotaging talk around that, stop it. Release it. I'm gonna invite you to release it, right? The issue isn't too many ideas. We celebrate and give thanks for the evidence of abundance in its many forms, whether it's ideas, nourishing food, right? Water, love, money, etc., right? It is the ideas that actually bring in the income, right? So let's hold on to them. Let's treat our ideas very kindly. Again, the issue isn't too many ideas. The issue is we aren't taking action on a single one of them. So it feels like they're piling up. They're starting to maybe overwhelm us a little bit. But to commit to taking action in a focused direction is a deep, sacred honoring of your desires and needs. There's this saying, right? If nothing changes, nothing changes. It's true. And I know, I hate how true it is too. It can feel like there's so much changing in the larger world that we can sometimes fall into these comfortable cravings of wanting our life, our day, right? To be the one stable, unchanging thing amidst the chaos. But we know that craving is unrealistic. We know and we also know a craving is unreliable. It's fleeting, but our desire is here to stay. And what I want to invite us to consider is it is our desire that can help that can help us navigate the uncertainty with just a little bit more pleasure, a little bit more softness, a little bit more compassion, a little bit more breath, right? We pull our desires for the future into the present by taking imperfect action now. This is the world builder's favorite power move. I know it's mine. We know creative confidence doesn't fall from the sky. We summon it with our daily, weekly, monthly, seasonal efforts. And this creative confidence then reminds us that we've seen the future already. Now, all that's left to do is to build it. All right, y'all. We are wrapping up and moving to the invitation section of the podcast. And I have a special announcement. The Winter 2025 World Building Series is coming up, and this time it will unfold in 3 parts instead of the usual 4 parts. I have ran the World Building Workshop series so many times now that I have 4 or 5 different versions of workshops. So now I'm going to start kind of combining, like experiment with combining them in new ways. And I'm excited to bring this updated version of the series to you. Again, like, of course, as always, it will be free. This time, each workshop will focus on the iterative action you can take to move from perfectionism that might have us stuck inside loops of inaction and overwhelm to building creative confidence through the iterative work of honoring ourselves. And in turn, right, honoring each other, right? Honoring our desires and needs, honoring each other's desires and needs, always remembering they are often one and the same thing. So free workshop registration will begin next week. So keep an eye out for that. I'll send out the announcement in the Cedar School newsletter. So subscribe to that if you're not already subscribed. But here's this week's invitation. What's the through line inside of your ecosystem of ideas? If you say, Ayana, I'm just like the perfectionism. I had so many ideas. I don't know where to start. Write them all down. What is the common theme or flavor or value in them? Like this core through line. What are some of the similarities that you can pick up on? This is the pulsing desire, right? Acting as the mother tree, providing the sustaining nutrients to your entire system, right? Like this can really actually reveal the core desire that is like powering and generating all of these ideas. Let's get to the root theme, the root core idea, the root intention. Now ask yourself, what's a one-off artifact? It can be physical or digital that might serve as this materialized, like embodied representation of that desire. For me, it was a piece of paper, right? It was a zine. It was a syllabus that I folded up to 4 parts. For you, it might be a ceramic vessel. It might be an ebook. It might be a toolkit. It might be a meditation. Let's start there. Really think about it. Think about who that offer might serve. Now think about who our perfectionism, right, around releasing that offer might serve, right? Who might it serve if we never actually release that artifact? It won't be me or you. And this is not an invitation to judge ourselves. We're done with that. We left that at the door, remember? It's just an invitation to reflect and get curious. That's my invitation this week. Truly, 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 y'all. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the podcast for the World Builders, where we dive into the spells and strategies of Black feminist world building while exploring how offering the skills and wisdom from our journey of transformation might seed, resource, and deepen creative practices rooted in collective liberation. Don't it sound good? I firmly believe we all came into this world creative. We all came into this world with something to offer. And deep down, we all want to orient around politics of love, so love will win. All right. Again, we leave in the politics of fear at the door. These are the beliefs we try to honor inside of Cedar School. And if you want more support thinking through your activation phase, maybe you have incubated and you're like, ooh, I need to get out of this incubator, right? I've kind of been in this loop of maybe procrastination, perfectionism. I have all the books, I've read all the things, and now it's time to move to the next phase. It's time to kind of like activate some of these ideas. If you want support with that, then go ahead and download the Creative Offer Questionnaire to Oneself. The link is in the show notes. As always, this podcast will forever be free, but The best way to support it is by sharing it with a friend, a cousin, an auntie, your hairstylist, or taking a screenshot or a screen recording of the episode and sharing it on social media so other world builders can find us. You will never see a Cita School ad while scrolling the metaverse, y'all. I can't. If you ever want me to like rant about a pet peeve for like 24 full hours, talk to me about ads. That's all. That's all I'm gonna say. So, no ads from Cita School, which means I'm putting my faith in you and the work instead. Cita School deeply relies on word of mouth to keep the lights on. So tell a friend to tell a friend if you want to keep these episodes coming. I also heard rating and leaving a review helps too. And the second best way to support is by becoming a paid subscriber to the Cita School Substack at $5 a month, but only if you have the capacity to do so. Until next week, y'all. So be it. See to it. Breathe through it.